What's up, guys? It's Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down how wide receivers can never get pressed ever again by learning these press releases. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, wide receivers, if you would like to train with us this offseason, we're going to be traveling out to 15 different locations across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camp. So next up on our camp tour, we'll be coming out to San Francisco. That particular camp is sold out, but then we'll be coming out to Orlando, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles, California. So very first link in the description below, fellas, if you want some more information on what we'll be doing at those camps. Let's get started with this video. So now, first things first, first release we're going to be talking about is how many of you guys have tried to do that like kind of hesitation hop release and a DB has just gotten physical and jammed you right off the line on this. And that's happened to a lot of wide receivers, and we get a lot of questions about that. So how can you do that kind of patented Davante Adams hesitation skip release, but avoid getting jammed from a DB? And that comes down to having sudden feet. So let's play this thing full speed. So he does this little skip, hits him with a crossover, and then wins on this slant. So how does that exactly work? So many guys will try to do this little hesitation skip. They'll do this hesitation hop. Now, the purpose of the hesitation hop is to close the space with the DB. And we're going to get into some more examples and more releases of closing the distance with the DB that isn't a hesitation hop in a second. But when you hesitate, the goal is to, okay, I'm kind of gathering info, I'm closing space, I'm getting into this DB's cushion to make him uncomfortable. But I do the hesitation skip portion of it to kind of throw off his timing and to throw off his rhythm. A lot of wide receivers will close space and they only have one speed. They just come off the ball and they're very fast. Everything's 100 miles an hour, which isn't wrong. There are situations that call for that. But when you could change up the tempo and hesitate, that can get the DB's feet to stop. Now, to get separation, I have to be able to hesitate. I have to be able to go to 0 to 100 and hit this crossover. So how I'm able to have this explosive crossover is by keeping a good pad level as I hesitate at this DB. So when I come off the ball, I don't want to do this. A lot of wide receivers will come off the ball and their chest will pop up in the air and they stand super tall. This is why so many wide receiver coaches at your school, on your team, whatever it is, hate this type release. They'll say, we don't want you to do that Davante Adams type release. And they say that because guys have incorrect form and it takes too long. Their feet aren't sudden, like we're saying. They'll come off the ball and they'll stand straight up. So we need to make sure we're in explosive position, which allows me to have these two explosive steps. So now when I throw these crossover steps, you see how his first step is inside of his frame. So if we're trying to do an in then out crossover, trying to get this DB to jump to the outside, that first step cannot be super exaggerated and wide. I know I talk a lot about you want to step outside of a DB's frame to try to get him to move, but that first step can't be super wide because then you won't be able to push back and sell the inside cut. So you got to hesitate. It's a quick first step. You're shooting it in the ground inside your frame so you can push off of it, throw your hip to the outside, have some quickness about it, but actually be able to sell and get that DB off his platform. So let's play this again full speed, and then we'll look at Davante Adams doing the exact same release and how it's able to work for him. So Davante Adams made this release famous. Like this is why every wide receiver tries to mimic it because they've seen him do it at one point or another. And other NFL wide receivers mimic the exact same thing. But he's got probably the best hezzy move in the game. But let's talk about why he does that. So he comes off the ball, closes space, good pad level, and you see, same type of crossover that the last wide receiver used. Remember, fellas, anytime that I have cushion, I want to close the cushion. And we're going to show another example of Elijah Moore doing that in a second. But remember, when we close the cushion, if I'm going to change up tempo, I got to keep a good pad level position. There's a good example, if you guys want to look back a little ways, of him going up against Patrick Surtain and Patrick Surtain jamming him on this. Now, the only difference is that on this clip, Adams has a great pad level. On the other clip, he hesitates and his chest pops up a little bit. Even the very best wide receivers in the game make that mistake at one point or another. And he got jammed, and he got jammed bad. So when you come off that ball, we have to make sure I keep a good pad level. Let's keep my chest slightly ahead of my waist. That's what I tell my wide receivers. When your chest is slightly ahead of your waist, you're not going to be too far forward and you're not going to be standing up. A lot of guys have their chest past their knees. We don't want to do that either because then I'm falling forward and I'm off balance. So now, when he goes into this crossover, same idea. He hesitates. Look at his first step. It's inside of his frame here. throws to the outside. He uses that step being inside of his frame to push, to throw his hip, to sell with his upper half, because that's what that DB's watching, and that's what's going to get him to freeze to the outside. That's a great example of that hesitation hop from both of those wide receivers. So, fellas, when you want to do that hesitation release to avoid getting jammed from this DB, make sure we keep a good pad level. Let's keep my feet inside of my frame on the first move so I could sell to the outside. You need need sudden feet, and you need to be patient with a good body language to get open on this release. Okay, so now this next example here is understanding that how you guys can run a slant route versus inside shade without getting jammed. So everybody's biggest nightmare, right, is like, so when you have inside shade press coverage, I tell guys to do something called a diamond release. And everybody always asks this question. It's a fair question because they say, well, a diamond release is where you take 3 steps on a 45-degree angle. The goal is to get the DB to open up and play the fade, and then we slip back underneath. We get him to open up the gate. But everybody's biggest fear is that when they run outside, this DB is just going to sit to the inside, and then you'll run right into him and get jammed, and then you will not have any chance to get the ball from the QB. So why I talk about this is to avoid getting jammed is we have to take the correct angle off the line. I have to be hip to hip with this DB, and I obviously have to sell it to get him to move. So what does Elijah Moore do here? He closes space, then goes into the diamond release. That is what you would want to do in this particular case. So if this DB was right up on the line press, he wouldn't need to attack him and close the cushion. I call it like a little crossover move because he's already right on his hip. All he's got to do is sell to the outside for 3 steps, run full speed, commit his hips and shoulders to the fade, and run in full stride. And that DB has to eventually open up, or else he's susceptible to us just running deep. So when we have a gap between the two of us, if Elijah Moore would have just taken 3 steps outside, he still has to get to here. And even if he got that DB to bite, that DB could easily just recover, speed, turn, open up his hips, and be able to drive on it. So he has to get into his cushion. He closes space, just like we saw Devontae Adams do, and just like we saw that first receiver do. Close space, get close to him, then go right at his outside shoulder and his outside hip. This diamond release is more so about attacking the DB's shoulder and hip than it is a 45-degree angle. I know I say 45-degree angle a lot, but I would say it's more so about his shoulder and his hip. Because when you try to run straight past him and you can sell with speed, you're able to cut on a dime, DB has to honor that. And when you close that cushion, he doesn't have the space in order to be able to recover and react. Imagine if Elijah Moore was 2 steps out wider. This DB would have an easy recovery. Quarterback would still be putting the ball at the same spot, and DB could probably make a play on this. So it's a great example here from Elijah Moore, closing space, getting into the cushion, showing us how it's about attacking that angle off the line. So to avoid that press on a slant, you have to make sure, fellas, that we are closing the distance and being hip to hip with the DB. Okay, so now next example here, this is something we call a wide step release. So the reason why I'm going to show this is because when it comes to press releases, these are 2 releases that you guys can pair together that I'm about to show. So what wide receivers, like you see Devontae Adams, right? We talked about his hezzy skip. So he'll hesitate a DB, hit him with a crossover move, DB jumps, and he runs a slant. So how many times have you seen him hesitate, DB sits inside, and then he goes and just runs a fade? He doesn't even give a move. He just hesitates and goes because he's pairing his releases together, right? So what's another release I could pair together? Is that the only one? No, there's another release that you could use, and it's called a wide step. So a wide step release is exactly how it sounds. You guys have all probably heard me talk about that, but maybe not how you can pair it with something else. So if I got head up press or outside shade press, right? Head up press or outside shade is when I like this wide step, because if he's head up like he is right now and I use a wide step, that's a great release to get him to jump outside. If he's outside shade, I use a wide step because I threaten the outside, which is where he's trying to protect, because he's outside leverage, and that gives me a free inside release. I don't like this release, and this is how I'm going to show you the other release that we can build off of this when he's inside shade. We would use something else, and that's what I'm going to show. So you see how when he does this release, it's exactly how it sounds. We call it a wide step. It's a step with your back foot wide outside of the DB's frame to try to get him to play the fade. We have to make it look like a fade. So what this wide receiver does, he uses something called a kickstep. So a kickstep is this subtle step behind your front foot. You guys have all heard me talk about that. I don't think I need to talk too much about that, but it's for explosion. You take that step to load up your hips to prepare so you could step further. But when you step further, because you loaded up your hips, it allows you to bring your hips with the cut. And whenever you bring your hips and bring your upper body with whatever cut you throw, this cut will not get outside of your frame. So many guys reach with their cuts. Like let's say they're running like a post route, they will reach for the post break and then go run. But when you reach out, the cut gets outside your frame, you're more susceptible to injury, and you're going to be slow. So on a release like this, we cannot reach, because if I get stuck on this by being too far outside my frame, that gives the DB time to recover. I got to make sure I bring my hips. So I take that kick step, my hips and shoulders go, I step wide, my hips and my shoulders are committed to the fade, and that's what gets that DB to move to set me up for that free inside release. There comes a point where a DB has to move, fellas. He has to honor something. So if I can actually step wide with some quickness because of that kick step, bring my body because of that kick step, that is what will get me open. Okay, so now, like I said, we like this against head up and we like this against outside shade press. Well, now what if I get inside shade press? What's a release that I can use? And I call that a crossover release or a double tap release, like we just see Van Jefferson use right here. So when Van Jefferson's running this route, he goes here, he does a kick step. You see what he does with the back foot. And again, when you see constantly NFL wide receivers using this kick step over and over and over again, maybe that's something you should add to your game. Everybody plays in a different offense. Some of you guys are in a pro style offense. Some of you guys play in like a wing tee that doesn't throw that often. Some of you guys are in an air raid system. Everybody plays in different offenses. Everybody runs different routes. But you want to try to pull the things that the best guys in the world do and try to add that to your game. You should not try to emulate one receiver, but you should try to take pieces of his game and other pieces of other receivers' games that you're comfortable with and add it to yours. So he does this kick step. That's something you constantly see pop up. Watch his first step. So he does a wide step, doesn't step as far because he's trying to keep it inside of his frame, just like that first crossover we talked about, to push and sell to the inside. He takes a step wide. He does the kick step, steps wide, jab inside. Threatens to the inside, hips and shoulders committed to the inside. His hip is there, gets the DB to jump, and we got space on the fade. Because remember, pre-snap, he's inside shade. So he's inside shade. Remember, the whole reason we wanted to use a wide step when the DB was outside shade was to do what? To threaten his leverage, get him to move because he's trying to protect the outside. Whatever leverage he has, he's trying to protect there. So I would want to do a crossover move, a jab inside off of the wide step to threaten him here because he doesn't have help to the inside. He's trying to protect the inside. He doesn't want me to go there. So if I could threaten him there, actually step into his cushion, have my hips and shoulders commit, that's what's going to get him to move, right? It's pretty simple. So you just have to build your releases together so it looks the same. That makes you unpredictable. So he comes off the ball, kick step, 1-2, jabs back to the inside, and then is able to win on that fade ball. That is a textbook double tap release there from Van Jefferson and how you guys can build and add on to other releases. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys as usual. And again, fellas, we are coming out to 15 different states this offseason for 2-day long QB and wide receiver camps. So if you guys are local to one of those cities, would like to come out and get some work in with us, check out that very first link in the description below. I'll see you guys next time.